Hey, good morning and Happy New Year. I'm Brian Stelter, and it's time for Reliable Sources, our weekly look at the story behind the story of how news and pop culture get made. And we have a lot planned this hour, but let's start with breaking news out of Oregon, where an armed group, which some are calling a militia, have taken over the headquarters of a national wildlife refuge in rural eastern Oregon. Now, this is federal property managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So this has the potential to become a very big, very combustible story. On Twitter, it has been the top trending hashtag all night and all morning. The hashtag being used is Oregon under attack, with some people labeling these men extremists and even terrorists. But they say they are patriots protesting government overreach. Now, there's three things you should know before we talk to our guests about this. First, the occupation grew out of a rally earlier on Saturday in the nearby small town of Burns, Oregon. It was a rally supporting two local ranchers, Dwight and Stephen Hammond, who have been convicted of arson on federal lands. They're expected to surrender tomorrow. Now, second, during the takeover yesterday, no government employees were hurt. None were actually there at all because the refuge was closed for the holidays. And third, one of the men leading this occupation is Eamon Bundy, son of Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy. He spoke to CNN's Victor Blackwell earlier this morning.
We want the government to abide by the Constitution, abide by the authorities in which the people have given it, and to play by the rules. We have no intention on using force or being aggressive or going on the offense. But just as all people have the right to defend themselves, that's exactly what that means.
There are big media questions here about the language we use to describe these men and about how they're getting their message out, and of course about the difficulty of even getting to this story in the first place. One of the reasons why there hasn't been more immediate coverage of this news is because it is so remote. One reporter in Oregon said to me overnight, this is a journalistic no man's land. We are standing by for a call from a reporter who's actually driving to the site from the Oregonian newspaper. As soon as he's able to reach us, we'll beep him in, but unfortunately he has weak cell service. So let's bring in Art Roderick, CNN law enforcement analyst who is a former assistant director at the U.S. Marshal's Office. Art, when you heard about this story overnight, what was your first thought?
Well, I'll tell you, over my career in the Marshal Service, Brian, I probably have dealt with situations like that on at least 3 or 4 different occasions, specifically with these types of groups. And I know we're lumping them into calling them, they're arguing whether we should call them a militia or not. But Mr. Bundy has gone out and made a call for supporters to show up at the Fish and Wildlife Refuge.
That's
and that
right.
They've got facilities for them to stay at. What's going to happen is what happened in all these other situations. You're going to have militia groups show up. You're going to have right-wing white supremacists show up, and this could really turn into a bad situation. Hopefully, the law enforcement side of the house will learn what the Marshal Service has learned since the early 80s, that if we just wait these people out, we can go in very peacefully and take this property back.
What do you think the conversations are right now within the federal government and within local law enforcement about what to do next? You know, we're looking at pictures from last night and from yesterday. We don't have anything new from there this morning. It's still early in the morning there, but we know that there are at least a dozen, maybe more people on this property. Presumably some law enforcement's either on the way or already there.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen, hopefully we won't do what had happened at the Bundy Ranch last year sometime or a couple years ago, is that we don't go out there with a large force, because that's exactly what they're looking for. And you know, we've got to negotiate this through, and I think a key part is going to be tomorrow what happens at the federal courthouse. And I know there was a quote that you guys had picked up from the U.S. Attorney out there in Oregon, and hopefully calmer heads will prevail here. And the last thing we need is some type of large confrontation, because that's when stuff goes bad. And I think in this particular instance, if we just wait them out, see what they've got to say, that eventually they're all going to go home. I mean, people are just starting to show up now, and this group could get fairly large with supporters as this news spreads out throughout the country. And hopefully if we just sit back, wait them out, things will calm down and everybody will go home.
You know what's going to happen next, though. You know the presidential candidates are going to get asked about this.
Right.
You know President Obama is going to be asked about this. You know it's going to become politicized. And we've already heard from activists online, many of them, I've been reading from them all morning, who say if these were Black Lives Matter protesters or if these were peaceful Muslim Americans, they'd be treated very differently by law enforcement. Do you think there's truth to that argument?
We're not talking about, I think you had mentioned it in the opening, because this is a very rural area. It is out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. What are they actually doing? They're not destroying property. They're not
no
looting
shots fired.
anything. Right, yeah. Exactly. I mean, you know, there's a whole separate situation going on as to exactly why they're there, and that'll be worked out through the legal process. But I think now that they've taken over this location out at the Fish and Wildlife, this brings in the federal side. And I know the federal government has learned over the years how to deal with these types of incidences, and hopefully Fish and Wildlife will call in their federal partners, which I know they will, and sit down and figure out how to resolve this as peacefully as possible.
All right, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thanks, Brian.
Very much appreciate it. Let's go to a media perspective now, talking about the coverage of this story with Dan Abrams, former executive at MSNBC, the founder of Mediaite, and an ABC News analyst. Dan, you know what happens in cases like this. Instantly, as soon as there's a news alert online about something like this, there are cries about why the press is not covering it enough. I understand why that happens oftentimes, but at the same time, it's hard to get resources out there. It's hard to get live trucks out there. It's hard to get a hold of the people who are occupying. Tell me what you think viewers and readers should know about the practical difficulties of covering a situation like this.
Well, look, there's no question there are practical difficulties, but let me also take the flip side of that, which is I hope that the media doesn't give this too much coverage, right? I mean, what we don't want to do is to sort of aggrandize these folks who are calling themselves militia members, when really what they are is armed anti-government protesters. That's what they are, and the key is armed. That's what makes it different from a lot of the other scenarios you were talking about. Yes. These people are armed there and talking about the fact that they are armed. They're not just happen to be having their arms with them. They are bringing them with them for a purpose to defend against possible federal action against a federal building. Back
in
to
fact,
the media
while you say
side.
that, I'm just pulling up a picture I hope we can put on screen from a reporter who is there, one of the few reporters who's in the area, Jason Wilson. He posted a picture last night of a couple of the occupiers of their vehicles, and he said he was encouraged, he was urged to leave by these men with weapons. He said he saw about a dozen people, and he said he expects many more reporters to be arriving there today. But that is an important point. They are armed, not just with handguns, in some cases, he says, with automatic rifles. So there is some heavy weaponry in this area.
Yeah, and no question. And look, so the media is going to have a delicate balance here. You're right. As a practical matter, getting to an area like this is difficult. But the media can overcome that. Particularly these days, it's become a lot easier than it used to be. I think the more interesting and important question is, how much coverage do we give it? And I think that depending on the amount of coverage is also potentially going to impact what both they do and the federal government does. And so the media has a huge obligation here to think long and hard about how big a deal to make this, and to focus on the sorts of questions you were asking, which is, what do we call these people? How do we refer to them? And I think it's really important that we don't lionize these people who are literally just taking over a federal building because they don't agree with a federal judge and they're armed.
I think we remember how in 2014, when Cliven Bundy was in the news, he was treated very sympathetically by news outlets like Fox News. We'll see if that happens again in this case. Dan, stand by if you can for me. I want to go to Ian Kullgren, a reporter for the Oregonian. I mentioned he's driving to the area now. We were having a hard time reaching him. He's on the phone with us now. Just give a sense of how remote this occupied building is, Ian.
Well, to give you an idea, Brian, driving out here right now, it was very hard to get cell phone service. That's about how remote. So remote, in fact, that one of my editors even suggested that we fly to Boise, Idaho, perhaps, and drive there because that would be faster. I think, when most people think of Oregon, I think of Portlandia, Portland, urban living, mountain streams, so forth.
Right.
Rural Oregon is very, very different. This is ranch country. This is high desert. These are people who have been hit very hard by the economic recession and the collapse of the timber industry, problems with the ranch industry, and it's a completely different world.
And let me ask you, you were able to reach two of the occupiers last night. You were able to speak with them. Were they unwilling, or were they wary of talking to you as a member of the media? How are they getting their message out, and what did they tell you?
Sure. Yes, they were definitely a little wary of talking to me. They're worried. They openly expressed, concern over talking to what they fear is the liberal media. they're really trying to get their message out by their own channels. They've got
Facebook videos,
they've got bloggers, they've got people who are more, sympathetic to their cause, who they've been talking to, who are echoing their message from inside there as well.
And you were told by the occupiers last night they are willing to stay there for years if need be, and they are willing to use violence if they feel they are attacked first. Am I getting that right?
Yes, that's right, Brian. They said they have enough supplies to stay there for years. They didn't really elaborate on what kind of supplies they have, if they have weapons. They said they're in a defensive position, and they don't really want to talk about that right now. They did stress, though, they are not looking for violence. They say they're trying to, get a movement going, really, and get more people to join them and occupy the space. It's almost like they want to start the rural version of Occupy Wall Street or something like that.